All right, we are back. Obviously, with a much better quality microphone. Thank you, Blue Yeti. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's yap, shall we? Chapter 1. Full name: Empire and the Emergence of World Powers, 1870 to 1919. This is just imperialism. This is just imperialism. That's all this is. Imperialism, policy of extending political or economic power over another place, kind of similar to colonialism, according to the Brits. But chapter 1, for the most part, is just going to look at examples of imperialism from European nations, Japan, United States, and also how it impacts relations between these nations. Now that we're good with the overall, let's jump into section 1, shall we? Section 1, overall questions can ask, why was imperialism a significant force for the late 19th century Europe? So late 1800s, what is going on? Why is imperialism driving what these countries do? Now that we know what imperialism is, right, we got to take a step back and we got to figure out why we have imperialism. So again, imperialism, policy of extending political, economic influence over another place. And the Brits, they can explain this probably better than anyone else can, given their experience with it, because imperialism has been around a very, very, very long time, going all the way back to the 1500s. Countries were always exploring. Everyone likes money. Everyone likes power, resources. Europeans also love competing with one another and one-upping each other. So they are going to start a policy called mercantilism. Under a policy of mercantilism, you have a mother country, and this mother country goes out and they obtain colonies, and they exploit these colonies for the benefit of the mother country. Now, the mother country, what they do is they go and take over another territory. They take that territory's resources and then force the territory to only trade with the mother country for those resources. And the territory exists for the sole benefit of making the mother country richer. These territories are usually known as colonies. Now, think Great Britain and the US, right? Not like yet the United States like as a country, but the original colonies. Britain had the colonies, their resources. They took them, they sold them back to the colonies at a high profit. There's a whole lot more to it, obviously. This is obviously also what's going to lead to the American Revolution, but the American Revolution isn't the topic here. System of mercantilism is. Mercantilism often leads to conflict, and again, there you have the American Revolution. So the idea of going back and taking over other places for some sort of gain, it's a tale as old as time, really. What really decides the name of what we call it is going to be the motivation for it. Back in 1776, Adam Smith, he wrote a book, The Wealth of Nations. It's going to suggest that imperialism isn't profitable. Government control over an economy isn't needed in order to make a profit, and there's only such a finite amount of money that this isn't really good for the people, only for the government. Instead, he's going to favor capitalism and the free market. So once Britain loses control of their colonies, maintaining overseas possessions, along with conflict, proves to cost a lot. European imperialism is going to move away from the Americas. Again, high costs, revolutions. This is going to kind of make a change. Even Spain is going to stop exploring for a bit as we undergo this big change. That is until we see an even bigger change in the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution, we are now making goods by machine instead of by hand. We're going to see a lot more mechanization of goods. Goods are going to be made in mass production, making goods more quickly, more cheaply, more efficiently. Power is going to move away from how much gold and silver you have to how much you can produce. Gold and silver obviously going to be still valuable, but goods and services are going to become just as, if not more, economically valuable. So, Industrial Revolution, right? Goods are going to be made by machines in factories. This is all about industrializing. Again, factories and machines are going to be put up by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are just those who engage in business in order to make a profit. And innovation like steam power is going to allow manufacturing in factories for making goods like textiles. Textiles aren't going to be made by hand anymore. You're not going to have old granny knitting a sweater by hand, turning out like maybe one a week. You're going to have factories turning out like a bunch, like 100 per day. Again, now we're making stuff in a factory. So goods made in a factory, that's going to make them cheaper, easier, more efficiently, again, mass production, and innovations elsewhere are going to drive this as well. Like the railroad, you can now ship goods. You can now get goods from one place to another, again, more efficiently. Britain is going to earn the title the swept shop of the world because they are going to produce more goods more quickly than any other nations. And Britain's going to lead the pack for a while. Now, elsewhere, besides Britain, later in the 18th century, so later 1700s, other countries are going to start industrializing too. Britain's going to start to face competition from other Europeans, also as well as the United States. Germany is going to kind of start to come together. They're going to form a customs union known as the Zollverein. That is a customs union, again, working to boost trade. And eventually it's going to lead to the unification of Germany in 1871. Now, Germany unifying is going to pose a huge challenge to the British because this new country is going to start competing for a spot of viability. France, they're also going to start establishing trading posts around the world, and they're going to become more powerful as they try to protect their trade. British responses is trying to become more powerful than them, building their own bases, and also boosting their navy. Another way that power is going to shift is now to include the size of countries' navies for some reason. The bigger, more powerful navy you have, the more powerful country you are. So Europeans, they're going to be constantly competing, and this competition is going to be one thing that drives imperialism, competition between European countries like Britain and France, Britain and Germany, Germany, France, etc. But again, European countries are going to have a long history of competing. Constant competition is going to drive imperialism. That's one reason for it. Other motivations for imperialism. Entrepreneurs, the ones who are putting up the money to fund the Industrial Revolution, they now have a lot more money to invest. They're going to go looking for new places to invest it and sell whatever goods they produce. This is going to create a need for new markets. New markets are going to be places where we can now sell these new goods that we're making in mass. Reasons for imperialism can usually be broken down into a couple different factors, whether they are political or economic in nature. Economic has to do with money or the economy, duh. Political is power or interactions between imperial nations. So what reasoning does new markets fall under, for example? Well, entrepreneurs, they want new markets to invest their money, to make more money, and new market to sell their goods to make more money. Well, that's going to be obviously economic. So now you have factories. Inside these factories, you have machines. These machines, they make goods in mass. And what do you now need to produce these goods? You need resources. So the quest for resources to make these goods is going to be another factor that drives imperialism. Resources, they're needed to make goods. Imperial powers, they are now competing to take territory with valuable resources. Resources like cotton, rubber, tin, gold, diamonds, palm oils, other valuables that they can refine and make into goods. These resources are mostly found in Africa and Asia. So this is going to be another economic factor. Speaking of another economic factor, another one is going to be a long economic depression that's going to hit Europe towards the end of the 19th century. This is going to be like 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. And if you don't know what an economic depression is, it is just a strong economic downturn. In Europe, mass production led to more goods being available than people wanted to buy. Goods sit around with no buyer. There's too many goods, not enough people to buy them. Prices start falling. This is known as deflation. Rapid industrial growth is going to lead to too many goods being made. It's going to lead to deflation. This is an economic motivation. So now you have all these goods laying around. Prices are deflated. So what are you now going to do with all these goods? Well, you're going to try and find a new market to sell them. So another motivation could be to find new markets. Now, other motivations could include nationalism. Nationalism is a profound sense of pride in your country, the belief that your country is superior, whether it's culturally or politically or historically or ethnically or whatever, compared to other countries. Now, newly formed countries, they want to make a name for themselves and step onto the world stage by engaging in the policy of imperialism to show their power. Germany, for example, formed in the early 1870s, they really quickly attempt to go and get a start in imperialism. This is going to fuel competition between imperial powers. And this competition, well, this is going to be a political motivation. Quick example of this, Britain. Britain is always in constant competition to be the most powerful nation, and the ability of the Navy was used as a judge of power at this point. So countries are always going to be competing to have the most powerful Navy. Britain, in order to do this, they're going to pass what they called the Naval Defense Act of 1889. It's also known as the two-power standard. And what this meant was that the British Navy had to be superior to the next two most powerful navies in the world, which at the time were France and Russia, which really isn't saying much. But also, governments are going to portray their imperial possessions as symbols of pride, shows of power that people could support. These symbols of pride and power would often be subject to the same nationalism that would be felt back home. So, like, for example, France, they would try to spread French culture around the world because they believed their culture was superior. This also ties into other political motives as well. Social policies in terms of governments portraying imperial gains is beneficial to everyone, not just the government, not just the wealthy business owners who are profiting off of it. Governments, they're using imperialism as a way of uniting the people, regardless of social class, under the aim that imperialism is good for the development of their country. So that fosters nationalism, really. Another key political motivation for imperialism is going to just be gaining control of key regions. Key regions are just regions that are important to the success of country's imperialist goal. While taking over a place to drain its resources and subjugate the people, it's important for the success of imperialism, but there's other reasons behind this as well. Before imperialism, trade between Europe and places like India and on the continents such as Asia, it's not really an easy task. You had to go by boat, and taking a boat, well, it's dangerous, especially if you're going all the way around the bottom of Africa. Besides being dangerous, it also takes a lot of time. Now, to alleviate some of this harsh trip, the British, what they're going to do is they're going to establish power in Cape Colony. That's in southern Africa. So other countries, they are also going to establish other trade ports along their own trade routes, and controlling these key regions, well, it's a strategic measure, because if you control trade ports on your trade routes, that makes it easier for you to go trade. So even more of a strategic measure in taking control of key regions is going to be the construction of what we know as the Suez Canal. Suez Canal. Canal is a man-made waterway, just so you know the difference between a river and canal. Canal is man-made, river is natural. Anyway, Suez Canal pretty much cut right through the middle of Egypt. It's going to be built by Britain and France, and this canal, what it does is it cuts down the travel time by ship enormously, making trade a whole lot easier and a whole lot more profitable. This is really prosperous until the 1880s, when Egypt's government starts to become a little bit unstable. This is going to wind up threatening the existence of the Suez Canal, because if hostile power takes over Egypt, they could easily close off the canal for any other use besides themselves. So what Britain is going to do is they're going to swoop in, and they're going to take over a little bit of political influence in Egypt's government to ensure that Egypt doesn't collapse, and also to make sure that they still get the benefit of using the Suez Canal. Now, outwardly, this looks like Britain just making sure Egypt is good. That they're taking care of, that they don't collapse. But again, deeper, what's happening here is Britain is taking power over the Suez Canal, protecting it and making sure that they're still able to trade. And this is going to be one of the first real examples of a European nation exerting political influence over a different place in Africa. And this is going to be really where the starting point is for other imperial Europeans to follow suit and heading to Africa. This is going to be what starts a move, really, to ensure trade continues. And what this does is it turns a large-scale political motivation for other imperial Europeans to go and pursue imperialism in Africa. This is new imperialism. So, new imperialism. Well, what makes it new? Well, again, the idea of imperialism, it's not new, but what's new is that now imperialism is going to look towards Africa and Asia instead of other places like the Americas where it previously was. New imperialism is going to lead to an increased effort to maintain peaceful relations, right? Obviously, constant competition could lead to conflict between imperial nations. However, there's a real attempt to avoid conflict whenever they could, and even more in some cases to cooperate to accomplish their imperial goals. Now, this doesn't mean that tension and conflict won't arise, because there are some examples of where it does, but we are also going to see examples of cooperation. So, new imperialism. It also now includes countries that hadn't previously been imperial powers in the Americas. You have your classic France, Britain, Spain, Portugal, right? But now you're also going to see the USA. We're also going to see Japan. We're also going to see Germany. The USA and Japan we'll see like later in the chapter, but both of these imperialist awakenings are going to be brought about by industrialization, and we'll talk more about that down the road. So what else is going to make imperialism possible besides policies? Well, certain advancements existed now that really allowed imperialism to be much more successful and have a much grander scope than it did before. For example, medical advancements. Africa was known as the white man's grave, since Europeans, they really hadn't previously come into contact with any of the ailments that they would find in Africa. It's really easy to get sick there. So they're going to make developments such as quinine. Quinine is going to be developed by the French 1817. It's a medicine to combat malaria. Malaria is a deadly disease. It could easily impact imperial conquest by killing off pretty much everyone who's going. But medicines, medical advancements in general, they're going to allow imperialism to reach places that had not been reached before, that were deemed too dangerous, with like fear of dying from disease, like African jungles and other undeveloped places. Other technological advancements, you're going to see the Industrial Revolution. Obviously, you're going to further technological advancements. You're going to see the Bessemer process. Bessemer process created steel very easily and cheaply. Previously, steel is incredibly expensive to produce. Bessemer process is going to make steel very, very cheap to produce and very accessible. So now steel can be used to develop railways, to transport goods around a country. It could also be used to build ships, to transport imperial conquests around the world. A telegraph network is going to aid in communication and maintain control over overseas imperial gains to make sure that contact is kept between them. We're also going to have guns and other weapons that are going to allow Europeans to have a very clear power advantage over wherever they go. Other motivations, or in this case, a real justification for imperialism, was the opposition to slavery. Slavery is going to be outlawed by most Europeans by the 1920s, although U.S. didn't really outlaw slavery until after the Civil War. But Europeans, they're against the idea of the use of slavery and believed it was their responsibility to put an end to the practice. While Europeans were opposed to slavery, they very, very, very much believed in the theory of racial superiority. In the 1800s, scientists like Blumenbach and Gobineau, they developed theories regarding classification of different races, believing that Caucasians are superior to other groups. Charles Darwin, in his The Origins of Species, right, it portrays the idea of natural selection and the idea of survival of the fittest. Well, Darwin's work at this point is going to be applied to humans, which leads to further theories of racial superiority. Even though many explorers, they adopt the idea that they had the duty to civilize the people that they come in contact, they pretty much portrayed them and believed them to be godless heathens. So they would go and they would attempt to spread their culture and their religion because they believed theirs to be superior to whatever people had. Spread trade, Christianity, civilization, etc. Now, through this, they're also going to argue that they're making the lives of people better by bestowing whatever they have to give upon them. For example, King Leopold of Belgium, he justifies imperialism by saying that the natives of these lands, well, they wouldn't even really know how to use it. European experience, well, they can make a ton of money off of it, sure, so why waste it on them, right? I mean, if you ain't use it, you lose it. All right, so now that we got the why out of the way, let's kind of get into the who and where. One of the first real shows of imperialism was the British taking control over Egypt. And this is going to wind up opening the floodgates for the rest of this new imperialism. So other countries, they are going to go and follow suit. Most of the major players, they're going to be Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, and Germany, and all these imperial powers. They're going to begin a real scramble for Africa. This scramble for Africa is going to line up these powers pretty much against each other in order to gain influence. This is going to be a huge competition between them. Now, most of their reasoning is similar or aligning in terms of the motivations that we just kind of went through, but we just got to kind of connect each imperial power with where they go for now. So they're all seeking resources to make goods for their industrialization and new markets to sell their own goods. Portugal, starting off with them, is kind of interesting. They just don't want to be left out. They see everyone else doing it. They kind of get FOMO. Germany joins late because they unify late. They unified in the 1870s, and once they do, they immediately go and try to build their empire. The chapter title, it references empires, right? Empire building. This pretty much just consists of a country and its territories that it has imperialized. So these territories, again, they're gained through imperialism, and territories, they're going to be acquired. But what happens when imperial powers get there? What do they do? Well, good things, right, and bad things. They begin harvesting resources for their own use, bring them back to the mother country. Sometimes they use the natives for forced or cheap labor, taking advantage of them and treating them unfairly. They could potentially educate the natives in European culture, of course, and give them technology, religion, medicine, etc. If they don't go along, then oof, oh well. Now, with this happening, how do you keep raising support for it? Support for imperialism didn't just pop out of nowhere. In Britain, any negative impact is pretty much downplayed. The British convince the people that it benefits them. And the locals of the place that they go, well, it benefits them too. They also tie it into nationalism. People should be proud of their country and their imperial possessions. Young people are going to be taught that in school, that it's a good thing. France, same thing. Kids are going to be taught that it's a good thing. They also tied imperialism to patriotism, again, similar to nationalism, France's pride in your country. They also tie it into religion, and they say that it's their duty to do this. Germany is originally a bit hesitant to imperialize. They were late to the game, remember, unifying late, and they quickly try to ramp it up. But originally, the government didn't really want to do anything. They didn't really want to take part in European imperialism because they were too new and not exactly too experienced or really set. But a lot of the wealthy business owners are going to wind up pressuring German officials to pursue imperialism, and well, they are going to. And Germany's going to try to use propaganda to inspire nationalism and raise support from the public. German Chancellor's name is Otto von Bismarck. He's going to pair the use of propaganda with responsible spending to build support, and from this, he says that it is going to benefit the newly formed and unified Germany. Now, that's support. What about the opposite? What about the opposition? Well, morality is obviously one. The moral argument here is that you can't just go and take land from people and then give it to yourself. Another is very obviously racism. Perceiving that other people are inferior based on their race on the continent of Africa. Obviously, yeah. Cost is another. Some are going to argue that the cost is going to outweigh the profit. Too much cost to watch over another territory far away. Conflict is another. Conflict could happen with competing imperial powers, or also the native people, especially ones that don't really go well in terms of your experience imperializing. For example, like the Boers, where experienced imperial power can't even defeat the lowly natives. The whole idea, right, of the civilizing mission, that imperialism seemed to have a different meaning depending on whose point of view you looked at it through. Some perceived it as their obligation, as their superior role of being Europeans. Others thought that it was just a poor justification to imperialize and subjugate the natives and take their resources. That's pretty much going to do it for this section of chapter 1. Now, going back to that original question, why is imperialism such a driving force of the late 19th century in Europe? Well, some responses could look like this. Obviously, new imperialism is going to start with a focus on Africa, and the scramble for Africa is created by the Industrial Revolution, created by need for more resources to make more goods. Mass production of goods is obviously good for the economy. You need more markets to sell these mass-produced goods in. Lots of support for imperialism from the imperial powers themselves, driving nationalism from the civilizing mission, from the idea that Europeans, it's their job to go and civilize these people. Also, competitions between imperial powers to build empires is going to be heated. So that's going to do it for that. Next, what we'll look at is the second section, which focuses more on the impacts of imperialism on international relations.